figure that one out. Yeah, hey, it's 1:30 and we're on camera now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the Appropriations Committee. Welcome to the Appropriations Committee hearing. My name is Rob Clements. I'm from Elmwood. I represent Legislative District 2, which is Cass County and Eastern Lancaster County. I serve as chair of this committee. We'll start off by having members do self-introductions, starting with my far right.
Steve Erdman, District 47.
Warren Lippincott, District 34.
Myron Dorn, District 30.
Christy Armendariz, District 18.
There are other senators absent currently that may have bills in other committees, and some senators may come and go during the hearing. It just means that they're doesn't mean that they're not wanting to hear your testimony, but they have other obligations. Assisting the committee today is Tamara Hunt, our committee clerk. To my left is our fiscal analyst, Suzanne Holden. Our pages today are Malcolm from Omaha, UNL student, and Kate from Kansas, the UNL student. At the entrance, you'll find green testifier sheets on the table. If you're planning on testifying today, please fill out a green testifier sheet and hand it to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. If you will not be testifying but want to go on record as having a position on a bill being heard today, there are white sign-in sheets at the entrance where you may leave your name and related information. These sign-in sheets will become exhibits in the permanent record after today's hearing. To better facilitate today's proceeding, I ask that you abide by the following procedures. Please silence your cell phones. For bills, the order of testimony will be introducer, proponent, opponent, neutral, and closing. When we hear testimony regarding agencies, we will first hear from a representative of the agency. Then we will hear testimony from anyone who wishes to speak on the agency's budget request. When you come to testify, spell your first and last name for the record before you testify. Be concise. We request that you limit your testimony to 5 minutes or less. Written materials may be distributed to the committee members as exhibits only while testimony is being offered. Hand them to the page for distribution when you come up to testify. If you have written testimony but do not have 12 copies at this time, please raise your hand now so that the page can make copies for you. With that, we will begin today's hearing with Agency 37, Workers' Compensation Court. Welcome.
Good afternoon, members of the Appropriation Committee. My name's Jill Schroeder, Jillschroeder, and I'm the administrator of the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Court. Today, I think the way that I plan to use my time, unless you have questions or want me to take a different approach, is to just spend a brief minute telling you about the Workers' Compensation Court, what makes us unique. And then there is an issue that has arisen as to the governor's budget that may be considered by this committee or other committees. And I think our time's best spent looking at that. So first, we're the Workers' Compensation Court. That is an independent court. So we fall under the jurisdiction of the Chief Justice, but we are separately provided for in statute, and we are separately funded, which is very important. Our court addresses issues involving workplace injuries. So our judges determine whether an injury has arisen out of and in the course of an employment relationship. On the judicial side of the court, or the adjudication side, we currently have 7 judges and a clerk of the court and 7 staff people. We also have an administrative side of the court where there are approximately 30 employees who make sure employers have coverage in place, who make sure if a worker needs to go back to work after injury, there is assistance in that regard. We receive reports of injury, approximately 35,000 reports of workplace injuries per year. So we have those two divisions of the court, the adjudication side and the administrative side. Our judges have statewide jurisdiction, which is somewhat unique and which does place upon us an obligation to pay travel expenses for judges. Last year, petitions were filed in the alleged injuries in 66 different counties in Nebraska. So our judges may have to travel to those counties. Remember, we're dealing with workers who may be injured and may not be able to have the funds to travel to us, so we go to them. 97% of our funding in fiscal year 2022 was based on assessments collected from insurers, self-insured employers, and risk management pools. That is very different. We don't have filing fees except a $15 filing fee when a settlement is filed. So we are very much assessment based. One other aspect of our funding that I think is important for you to understand is that we assess based upon the previous calendar year. So when we assess the assessments, you have to let the end of that calendar year go by, and then we are able to make our assessments. So we receive our assessment money in March, April, and May. That is important, I think, to you, because when you look at figures during the legislative session, that may be right as we're receiving funds, but they have to last through the following year. So be aware of that. Our timing is different. I want to tell you a little bit about our cash fund where these assessments are placed, because the cash fund is something where over the years that formula for it was put into place at a time when our offices were in the Capitol building. We are now located in private buildings in Lincoln, in the courthouse in Omaha, but private buildings in Lincoln. So we do have expenses that were not considered at the time the formula was put into place. We now pay rent, we have to pay for our own security. And so those are important things, I think, for you to understand about the formula. Because over the years, workplaces have become safer, loss costs or premiums on which our assessments are based have been reduced because of safety in the workplace and a reduced number of injuries. Because of that and rising expenses, our budget is pushed now to the point where we believe in February of 2024, we'll be in a deficit situation. As a possible solution to that, the governor's budget has proposed that our self-insurance portion of the assessment, so not insurance companies, self-insured employers, those assessments are currently split with 1/3 coming to the court and 2/3 going to the general fund. The governor's budget proposes in LB 818 that the portion currently going to the general fund come to the court for our operations. And that was proposed as a method of having us continue to be self-sustaining. The Workers' Compensation Court has not had general fund money since 1996. I want to tell you one other thing about those assessments. So we make the assessments, and in our cash fund, there's what I would call an abatement procedure. I believe this is the only cash fund in Nebraska that has such a provision. It says, and this is in 48-1,117, it says if at the end of any fiscal year, the funds in our cash fund are 3 times our expenditures, then there is an abatement. We don't assess for the following year. That's relevant to what you do, because over the years when our cash fund rose, which specifically was in 2003, 2010, and 2011, the legislature diverted funds into the general fund instead of allowing our cash fund to self-execute and allow, it to rise toward an abatement. That was to the tune of $6 million. And at the time, the administrator, it was someone other than I, at the time, the administrator said, you're going to hurt us in the long term if you start taking our money and diverting it to the general fund. So now, frankly, that day has come where we believe that $6 million over the year is now coming to fruition. And so we have made a deficit request. We are likely to need assistance in fiscal year 2024 if the proposal that the money from the self-insurance assessments that's currently going to the general fund, if indeed that proposal through LB 818 or some other method, if that indeed comes to fruition, we've already assessed for this year. So we would need some solution to the funding for this year. And then after that, we should be self-executing again. We have spoken with the legislative fiscal analysts about this situation. There is a concern that LB 818 and this transfer that is contained within section 48-145 is exactly where the language is that says instead of going to the general fund, this money would come to the court for operations. The proposal that amendment take place is in LB 818. There's concern that that is a substantive change that belongs in a different committee. There has been a hearing on LB 818 already, I believe, and but we may need to look for a solution. We are hopeful that the concept of changing this distribution of the money into the compensation for cash fund, we hope that it can be accomplished through some mechanism, but that may be a place where you have questions. For fiscal year 2022, it was approximately $2 million that went to the general fund. So that is approximately the amount that we are proposing. The compensation court, again, this is on self-insurance assessments. The compensation court received approximately $1 million and approximately $2 million went to the general fund. Again, self-insurance assessments, we assess against insurers and risk management pools as well, but that's a separate assessment. So with that, do you have questions or is there information that we can provide to you to help you make an informed decision about our appropriation?
Any questions? Senator Wishart.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So just to be clear, there's a piece of legislation that's passing through another committee. What committee is that?
So it's in the governor's budget. It's in LB 818.
Oh, it's in the governor's budget.
Correct.
Okay.
So I think the question is whether it would be amended into something else or what would happen with that provision if indeed it is substantive and that change can't be made in the budget bill. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if the determination is made that that level of statutory change cannot be made within the budget, would we have time next year to introduce a piece of legislation and see it through? What I'm trying to get at is, I know that in this budget request, it's asking for general funds, and that may have to be an option that we take in the future. But you had said that 2025, or is it 2024 or 2025?
It will be fiscal year 2020. Okay, it's in
24,
February.
25.
It's in February of 24. Yes,
Thank
February of 24.
So what we're hearing from you is it's something we need to address this year.
We would very much like it to be addressed this year through whatever way it needs to best be addressed. And I think it's best for everybody to try to find a permanent solution now instead of putting a Band-Aid on it and then having to come back next session to make a more permanent adjustment. So we are very much in favor of trying to make a permanent change at this time.
Okay, thank you.
And there are other bills affecting courts operations that may present an option for this issue to be addressed this session.
That was going to be my question. Those bills are in business and labor, is that correct?
That is correct.
That's what I thought. Senator Armendariz?
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for being here. You had mentioned that workplaces are getting safer, so can I assume there are not as many claims?
So the number of claims over the years has trended downward.
And what does that mean to then your operations and workflows?
So it means that we have continued to carry on, and frankly, some of the activities we have changed quite a bit. The example that I would give you is that within the area of compliance, so holding employers responsible for having insurance coverage, we have been able to increase our enforcement to make sure that employers have coverage in place. So we've sort of switched resources around to make sure that we're continuing to carry out our mission.
Okay.
But so just because fewer cases are litigated on the adjudication side, or just because fewer overall, the number of first reports of injury that are filed has trended downward, there's still important work to do. We've just adjusted our focus a bit.
So you're maintaining the same budget even though the workload has decreased?
I
For
would
what
say
it was
that
organized to do?
I wouldn't put it in terms of maintaining the same budget from the standpoint that several of the items of cost are rising. And frankly, some of them are extremely important. You hear from every agency that recruiting and retaining high quality employees is important for the state, and that is critical to our mission. Salaries have risen, and as they perhaps should if we want to recruit and retain good employees. So, and then as I pointed out, our rent, having to pay for private security, particularly for judges and courtrooms, that is something important for us to do. Those costs are rising.
So you also mentioned you moved out of the Capitol.
Correct, several
Why did you
years
move out
ago,
of the-
approximately 10 years ago. And frankly, I'm not sure what all the reasons were for that because that was long before my time.
And that increased your expenses?
Correct,
Okay, that's all.
correct, yes. And I think the Capitol is relatively full right now, it's my understanding, and nobody's looking to have us move back in.
Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. I have a little different question. It's off the budget, but you may or may not have heard that I was trying to fix an issue we had with insurance companies coming in and doing an audit on some of the people that workman's comp. And they discovered that they had, for the lack of a better term, 1099 employees who were contract labor. And they then have placed a surcharge on those employers. And some of them have paid as much as $7,000 in surcharges for people who are contract labor. They're not a W-2 employee. They're not a full-time employee. They only get paid when they do something or sell something. And I tried to solve that issue. I don't know whether I'm going to get it solved or not, but something needs to be done to solve this issue. And I don't know that going to court is the answer, but if you could help me understand how I might go forward to solve that issue, I'd be grateful for your comments.
I am happy to talk with you about that, and perhaps it's best done after this hearing so that we don't tie up time, but it is a very complicated issue in terms of the premium audits that take place. And so, yes, I'm happy to follow up. And just to acknowledge, we have had a conversation, probably more than one, about that issue, and we can continue to discuss it.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Other questions? You said you have 7 judges. Are any judges about to retire?
So I will say that LB 426 proposes that that we reduce the number of judges from 7 judges to 6 judges. And it is my understanding, based upon a statement made at our public hearing in December, that one of our judges does intend to retire in the coming months.
Does the agency support that bill?
Yes. Frankly, that is on the adjudication side of the court. So our presiding judge is working on that legislation.
All right. Just to be clear, the self-insured businesses, right now, 1/3 of their assessment is going to your cash fund and 2/3 to the general fund.
Correct.
And you would like to change it to 100% cash fund and none to general fund.
Correct.
Right.
And that's what the governor's budget proposes.
All right.
And Senator Clemens, if I may, I think the reason that was proposed was so that we could continue to be self-sustaining.
Yes.
And that was seen as a long-term solution to have us continue to operate ourselves without needing to come back for general funds.
But insurance company assessments would still be divided, or are they cash funds only?
So I do not know where all of the assessments that the Department of Insurance collects, how those are divided.
Oh,
But we receive a portion of those assessments,
oh, okay.
if that makes sense.
Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clemens, and thank you for being here. Mine's a little bit of follow-up on his. So this proposal in the governor's budget, is that a one-time now, or is that going to be an ongoing?
That-
100%, that's going to be ongoing.
Correct. It is the proposal that it's ongoing. And I do believe in part, when the formula was put into place, as I said, we were here in the Capitol. We didn't pay for security. We didn't have to pay for rent. So the formula really sort of needs to be reconsidered. And this seems to be the best way to accomplish that. But then we haven't had general fund money since 1996. So it has worked relatively well until now. And we hope that if this change is made, and I'll call it the LB 818 change, even though I understand it may need to be accomplished in a different way, but that change should sustain us then for the years to
And
come.
the proposal in the governor's budget, then there's no increase in fees. In other words, the fees aren't going up. It's just where the allocation is going, it's a general back.
You're correct, yes.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Yes, you're very welcome. And I would just close by saying, if anybody has any questions, we do have our annual reports on our website where I am happy to answer any questions that you have at any time. So thank you very much.
Are there other testifiers regarding the workers' compensation court budget? Either proponent, opponent, or neutral? Seeing none, I have no position comments, so that closes the hearing for Agency 37. We'll open the hearing for Agency 77, Commission on Industrial Relations. Is there a representative here? I see no representative. Does anyone wish to comment on the Agency 77 Commission on Industrial Relations? Excuse me just a minute. We have a comment, a letter from the Commission on Industrial Relations saying that they accept the preliminary recommendations of the committee. Were there any others wanting to comment on the Commission on Industrial Relations? Seeing none, we do have, that's what I just read. We had one proponent letter. That closes the hearing for Agency 77. We'll move to open the hearing for Agency 85, Board of Barber Examiners.
45.
45. Okay. What's that say?
85. You said 85.
Oh, all right. Board of Barber Examiners, and we have a position comment. Do you have it here? Right. I do have one position comment. This is from the Director of the Board of Barber Examiners. And let's see. He has no comments about our recommendation. Well, that was the director. Any other testifiers regarding the Board of Barber Examiners? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing for Agency 45. We will now open the hearing for Agency 68, Latino-American Commission.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for receiving me today. For the record, my name is Maria Arriaga, spelled M-A-R-I-A, Arriaga, A-R-R-I-A-G-A. And I am the new Executive Director of the Nebraska Latino-American Commission, position that I took over on October 11, 2022. So because of that, I'm kind of new in this position. I have like roughly 4 months and a half. So I'm gonna try to talk a little bit more about myself first, because I want to introduce you to you, since I don't have the chance to meet you in person, to all of you yet. Some of you already know me, but I would like to start saying that I'm a Mexican immigrant who came in search of the American dream. And I can say that after much effort in breaking down barriers, obstacles, facing challenges, and obviously improving myself every day, here I am talking in this, and the same table with the people that shape the future of our state. So that is why I'm very grateful, and I can say that is true when people say that this country and this beautiful state is a land of opportunities for anyone who wants to get ahead and live the good life. Precisely because of the above, being in charge of the Nebraska Commission on Latino Americans, I want to convey my message, the one that I proclaim by example. Latinos are the workforce of this country, and we are the backbone that sustained the country during the pandemic. We are all that, but we are also culture, integration, family values, unification, gastronomic enrichment, and huge economic contribution to the country and to Nebraska. In numbers, the Latin American and Caribbean immigrant population generated 16.1 billion in production of goods and services and created more than 79,500 jobs in 2019. Yes, 2019, during pandemic. So for that, you can see the exhibit 1 that I attached. During these less than 5 months in charge of the commission, I have encountered great challenges to work on, challenges that I see as a possibilities to improve and set a precedent within the Latin American community in Nebraska. The commission serves close to 200,000 Latin Americans through the state, and since I took this position, my mission has been clear, trying to reach everyone no matter where they are. It will seem like a difficult task, I know, but it's not impossible. As I said before, I like challenges. The primary message of the Commission on Latin Americans is to be the link between the population and the state, the government, the legislative body, many times for us, and especially for those of us who are immigrants, seem so far away, so far removed from all realities. But that actually, thanks to this great state that is Nebraska, and through our commission, we can demonstrate that the government is the people and for the people, and that is close to everyone, even those of us who once believed it was not for us. We are a modest commission with a tireless dream of serving our Latinos with tools, resources, information that can help them to have a better quality of life, a better integration, adaptation to the system, to the laws of this country, so the Latino who gives his life working for his family and this state know that he is also represented and supported by his government. We deal with all kinds of situations, from translating a call or questions about where to go to resolve their issues, to reports about labor violations in the workplace, or questions regarding how and where they can vote or find about the legislature. The point is that the services we provide are endless, variable, and sometimes out of our hands. But the important point is that they see us as an entity of supporting the state government that makes them feel protected, but above all, included and represented. You might notice that I have a passion for my work, for my community, for this state that I call my own, and that I deeply respect, which is why I accept to be in charge of the commission, even though the salary is not similar to the salaries of the other commissions in the state, and much less in the private sector. I drive 120 miles daily. I live in South Omaha, and I do this with pleasure for my work and my community. However, the high cost of gasoline has had a tremendous impact, for example, in my income, and an issue that I really did not consider at the beginning when I accept the position. I continue to give my best effort every day because I want to be an example for all those Latinos, for those immigrants who have dreams like mine. For this reason, I respectfully request reconsideration of our budget request proposal, and I'm happy to ask any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Senator Vargas.
Thank you, Maria. And I know you were hired at the end of last year. So we just appreciate you stepping into this role. We haven't had a lot of turnover in this position, but it's exciting to have you. I know we've met and talked. I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if you wanted to speak to a little bit of the work of the commission in regards to the Latino Summit,
Yeah.
the Youth Summit, because it's an investment that the legislature has made in the past as matching funds towards private funds. And
Yeah, well, the Latino Youth Summit is an event that happens every year, and it is hosted for different cities in the state. Has been hosted by the Columbus in the past, if I'm not wrong, 2 or 3 years. 3 years, and it's a great event because Latinos from all over the state gather together and they start. Well, obviously, learning about opportunities, about moving forward in their education. It's with a purpose for them to be encouraged to move forward because unfortunately, Latinos we have this increased number, but a big number of the Latinos that doesn't pursue an education further than high school. So the plan for this summit is encourage them and to show through the speakers and through examples how they can move forward and be participating in different other areas, not just, I'm not saying it's anything wrong, but through this history, Latinos has been saying, oh, they're working the packing plants and everything, but we want to show them that they can do more than that. And for example, I'm one person that can show that you can do something. And that is one of the purposes of this summit. They gather hundreds of young Latinos, and if you go through the website, it's amazing to see it because you see how good is every year is better. So yeah, this year is going to be in Columbus as well. So we are looking to have a different city for the next period.
well, we appreciate it. And, I've had the opportunity to attend in the past, and the emphasis on workforce development in a lot of the higher education institutions, especially community colleges, making connections to the youth has been a big deal. I'm excited to see what you do. I know that this commission, for just the history of some of the newer members, has been one of the leaner commissions in terms of spending and also for director salary. And I appreciate you making that ask, or the previous director making the ask and yourself making that ask, because I think it's important for attention for all these different commissions.
Yeah, and I would like to mention as well, talking about the salaries and stuff, that I was hiring a marketing specialist in the past months, and it was pretty challenging because the salary for that position is $17. And for a person that's supposed to handle a lot of different tools, I'm saying technological tools like programs, like a camera, will be a person that will be able to write a journalism style. So a person with that type of level of education making $17, which is a salary that, for example, you can get if you work in a gas station or something like that, it's kind of very difficult to tell someone that is going to be performing 10,000 different varieties of duties for that salary. And I can say that because we are a pretty small commission. We are only 3 people there, and we do a lot of different stuff. One person does a lot of different stuff because we are pretty short in staff. So definitely $17 is it's something. It's not a salary according to the requirements for a position like that.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Are there other testifiers regarding the Latino-American Commission? Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Maria Whitmore, M-A-R-I-A, Whitmore, W-H-I-T-M-O-R-E. And I'm here to testify about the Commission on Latin Americans. I currently serve as commissioner and as a chair of the commission. Our commission worked on the strategic plan without an executive director since the former executive director retired in December 2021. Some of us volunteered to help in this task, and that is when it came to light that one of the challenges that we have is that level of the salaries that were being paid to teammates was not very competitive. And for instance, our office specialist has worked in the commission for 17 years, and she has never had a salary increase except for those that have been granted by the state because of inflationary pressures. We are not aware that our teammates have been maintaining these salaries increases. So the last salary increase was 4%. And considering that the estimated increase of inflationary pressure is 6 to 8%, that just gives us a very good idea of where those salaries are at. We consider our teammates at the commission our best asset, and that is why we kept the expenses very lean. We want to be a catalyzer for activities and the care for the Hispanic community, the Latin American community. However, it is really important to have good teammates in our office. And when we were trying to hire the new executive director, we found that quite challenging. For 3 months, we were not able to have any applications. And with this ad hoc committee that we had to be very mindful of the taxpayers' contributions and be very fiscally responsible. And so we were looking at merging some of the duties of the office, but that was not possible. We are truly at a bare minimum. On the other hand, the per diem that commissioners receive is $15 lower than other commissions. The other commissions are at the level of about $50. And that is 30% less than what each commissioner receives. We truly do it for our volunteer that's our interested. We're passionate about the Latin American community. And that experience of the recruitment, we decided that it was important for us to have well-paid teammates in our office. They do many tasks, and plus they have to be bilingual, and that is not easy to have, especially at those level of salaries. Our experience in that recruitment for the effort of the executive director position brought to light the need to improve those salaries, especially with the competitive Lincoln market that we have. According to the website salary.com, that's what we used, and then also some professional consultations. The levels for a position such as the executive director is between $70,000 and $106,000, with a median of $81,000 for Lincoln, Nebraska, depending on the candidate's experience and level of study, of course. This is coherent with inquiries that we did with labor professionals. Nebraska has a great blessing that we have plenty of work, but that also presents a challenge when we want to maintain our commission teammates. The mission of the Commission on Latin Americans is very attractive to many candidates. In fact, we had already selected twice different candidates, and they did not take the work because of the salary. And so that gave us, shed more light in the situation. So for instance, the different commissions in the state of Nebraska have salaries between $70,000 and $102,000. Our commission's executive director is paid $32,000 less than that, and $17,000 less than the Native American Commission executive director. The seniority of executive directors, education, and experience would, of course, be factors of a higher salary, but as you can see, the differences are quite abysmal. Returning to our experience in the recruitment process over the summer of 2022, we were able to attract more suitable candidates, and as I mentioned, a couple of those fell down because of the salaries. As you can see, we are competing here in Lincoln with private industry and some other non-for-profit organizations. And education, labor, the person who works for the commission has to know about labor, education, health, and they must understand they need to work with the Latin American population of all walks of life and many cultures as well as backgrounds. Someone who can be a bridge builder and discuss challenging topics in an educated and respectful manner with others, and willing to travel throughout the state and be available sometimes of hours. A person with such talents and disposition is not easy to find in the current market labor situation. The salary must also correspond with what we ask of that candidate. So we respectfully request your approval of the proposal for increase of salaries for our teammates. And if you should have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there other testifiers regarding Latino-American Commission?
Good afternoon, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Jaime Suarez. I'm from Omaha, and it's spelled Jaime, last name Suarez. And I'm here, they've done a very eloquent job of explaining why we want to be competitive with our salaries. But I come from the business side and want to kind of explain a little bit of what the Hispanic community brings to the state of Nebraska. We commissioned a study in 2018, comparing data from 1997 to 2012, in which in Nebraska, Latino and Hispanic firms had sales, actual revenue sales in the state of Nebraska of $141 million in 1997. In 2012, that grew by 207% to over $1 billion, which is a huge increase. And we know that from 2012 to now, it's an even larger an increase. On the business side, if you look at immigrants and children of immigrants, 44% of Fortune 500 companies were started by either an immigrant or children of an immigrant. Currently in Nebraska, 18 to 23% of small businesses are held by immigrants. So our job as a commission, and one of the things that we want to do by bringing in a really good director, is create a network to aid Latinos by helping them understand the law, helping them connect with other nonprofits to help start businesses and and keep creating the business spirit and the entrepreneurial spirit and the immigrants that they naturally have just by the willingness to come over from their country. With that, we do need to stay competitive, and what we're doing is we're competing with the private sector for a lot of this talent. And so if we wanted to, have a good information officer or staff, that's who we're competing with. And that's why I do ask that you do help us with that.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there other testifiers regarding Latino-American Commission? Seeing none, I have no position comments. That concludes Agency 68. We'll now open up the hearing for Agency 70, Foster Care Review Office. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Monica Gross, MONIKAGROSS, and I'm the Executive Director of the Foster Care Review Office. I'm here to testify about the FCRO budget request, which includes Program 116, Foster Care Review, Program 353, Nebraska Children's Commission, and Program 317, CASA Aid. The Nebraska Children's Commission is administratively situated under the Foster Care Review Office, and Amanda Adams is here from the Children's Commission and can speak to their budget request and answer any of your questions. Nebraska CASA representatives are also here today, and I believe will be testifying on LB 275 later this afternoon, and I'm sure they can answer any of your questions about their requested aid. You have my written testimony, and I don't intend to read all of that. I'd like to address the two items that were not included in the committee's preliminary recommendation. One is our request for funding to add an IT business system analyst coordinator position to our agency. And two, our request for reappropriation of any funds remaining at the end of the current fiscal year for software development and OCIO charges in the next biennium. Specifically, we request an additional $96,793 in fiscal year 23-24 and an additional $98,076 in fiscal year 24-25 to hire, train, and equip an IT business system analyst coordinator to support the information systems and technology needs across our agency. And a little bit of background, prior to 2016, the FCRO data was housed in the nFocus system operated by the Department of Health and Human Services, which provided the technical support for that system. In July 2015, the FCRO began the database design and modernization process for our current independent data system, the Foster Care Tracking System, or FACTS as we call it, using the retention of carryover funds from fiscal year 2015. When the FACTS system became operational in April 2016, no technical in-house expertise, positions, or funding were reassigned from DHHS to the FCRO. FACTS development has been a phased process that is still ongoing. Over the years, the continuation of the systems coordination and technical work has been absorbed by our staff to the best of our ability. The current staffing configuration is insufficient to meet the current data system and technical needs of the FCRO. Our vision is to add this position to our research team, given that they already address the technical and systems involvement in our agency. Currently, our research team consists of 3 individuals. Research Director Heather Wood is here today, and she would be able to answer any of the committee's questions regarding how our research team currently functions, their duties, and further describe the need for this additional position if needed. The other research team members consist of 1 research analyst 2 and 1 administrative technician. This small team is responsible for maintaining and updating our data and tracking system, programming and troubleshooting data queries, retrieving and analyzing data, preparing data visualizations and summarizing findings, preparing data models and data dashboards, creating and publishing data reports, including quarterly and annual reports to the legislature, responding to internal and external data requests, preparing and analyzing staff and stakeholder surveys, coordinating research project collaborations with external partners, participating on system work groups and committees, and conducting all Bridge to Independence reviews, which involve additional tracking and reporting. In addition to leading a data evaluation work group that reports to the Bridge to Independence subcommittee of the Nebraska Children's Commission. The current research analyst, who is a 30-year employee of the FCRO, who has over the years assumed many duties which are not typical of a research analyst too. As part of an agency-wide succession planning effort, the employee, the research analyst too, was asked to identify all of the various duties she performs on a regular basis. And upon review of that list, it was apparent that they fell into 2 broad but distinct categories. 1, conducting various research activities, such as literature reviews, data collection, analysis, interpretation of findings, and reporting, which includes the preparation of data reports and presentations. And 2, technical duties related to business systems analysis and design, gathering and relaying business requirements, testing and improving system changes, offering system support and analysis for the agency, and liaising with both FCRO internal staff and the programmers and developers at the Office of the Chief Information Officer, or OCIO. These two lines of responsibility require the current employee to toggle between the two distinct functions frequently throughout the day, resulting in operational inefficiencies and loss of time and productivity through no fault of the employee and despite her 30 years of experience with the FCRO. This is just not sustainable in the future. The IT Business Systems Analyst Coordinator position would be responsible for the business systems analysis and design duties that I described. We, in deciding on this position, we sought input from the OCIO administration, and they agreed that having the technical duties under one FCRO staff member who could liaise with their staff and whose day didn't involve trying to satisfy both research and technical duties would be useful for and beneficial for their agency as well as ours. Over the years, the FCRO has been intentionally fiscally conservative and for many years had implemented a strategy to save from unexpended general fund appropriations and earmark those funds to make the much needed and ambitious modernization of the FCRO's database, resulting in our current FACS data system. While the initial development of the FACS database was completed in 2016, new data forms also had to be created within the FACS system to capture data related to children in out-of-home care who had experienced abuse and neglect, as well as youth supervised by probation who were in out-of-home care. And those data forms have been updated and implemented over the years. Ongoing programming is required to correct data discrepancies between DHHS's NFocus system and the FACS system, and to add or modify programming to mirror information as it appears in NFocus, and also to reflect changes that take place in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems. We anticipate at least some necessary modifications every biennium. We began several projects in fiscal year 23, including adding functionality to minimize duplicate data entry across records, creating additional fields and response options to allow for greater specificity of the data collected, and correcting identified issues to improve efficiency and accuracy of the data. Projects planned for the 23-25 biennium include automation of data received from juvenile probation and the courts, which is now manually entered into our system by our staff. Development of data forms on FACS for bridge to independence reviews, for children placed in informal living arrangements, and for duly adjudicated youth. Integration of local board member data onto FACS, and read-only access to FACS data for judges with juvenile court jurisdiction. As part of our process improvement practices, the FCRO has formed an internal systems improvement work group, which meets regularly to identify proposed enhancements to our FACS system and other systems that we regularly use. We hold monthly meetings with OCIO management to strategize and prioritize projects. And while these activities have proven beneficial, alone, they are simply not enough. Many of the projects I just mentioned have been on the FCRO's IT plan for years, and unfortunately are likely to remain in the planning phase without increased FCRO staff capacity dedicated to moving them forward. Over the last biennium, communication and responsiveness of the OCIO has improved dramatically. We've seen our projects prioritized in no small part, I believe, due to the availability of funding in our budget to cover the costs involved. The relationship between the two agencies has benefited from the current electronic communication platform used by the OCIO, as well as the monthly meetings between the FCRO and OCIO management. While we've made a lot of progress, several projects identified during the last biennium remain to be completed, as well as newly identified data system enhancements. In order for the FCRO to fulfill our statutory duties of independently tracking children, appropriately selecting children for review, and sharing the information gathered in reviews with the legislature, stakeholders, and the public, we must maintain a robust data system that is flexible and able to evolve as the operational environment changes. It is imperative that the FCRO be permitted to carry over any remaining funds from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24 to be allocated to IT projects and software development. The FCRO appreciates the committee's recommended continuation budget for our office and respectfully requests that the committee consider funding our request for an IT business system analyst coordinator position. In addition, we request the reappropriation of any remaining general funds in the fiscal year 2023 budget to be used for database maintenance and ongoing software development. This funding will ensure that the FCRO continues its important role of providing oversight for the most vulnerable children in our state. Our agency is small, but our work is very important. As the Nebraska child welfare system has undergone a great deal of upheaval over the last several years, oversight of the foster care system was and is more important than ever. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and the turmoil in the Eastern Service Area, the FCRO has continued the citizen review process for Nebraska children in out-of-home care. FCRO staff played a vital role in the transition of child welfare cases from St. Francis Ministries to DHHS in 2022. In addition, all 53 local review boards representing communities across the state continue to meet during the pandemic and continue to meet today to ensure children in out-of-home care in Nebraska are safe and their needs are being met. Thank you for your continued support of the FCRO and children and families in Nebraska, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Further questions from the committee? Senator Armendariz.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. So you have somebody that's currently taking the business, IT business analyst duties, or you don't have an IT business analyst, so somebody else is currently taking those duties on as their own.
Right, our research analyst too.
So have you looked into hiring an IT firm that does this for small businesses on maybe a part-time basis? If this wasn't a full-time position in the first place, and maybe we could save some expense that way.
Well, we haven't looked into that, but I think this would be an ongoing need that we have, and that person would really, to be most effective, would have to be embedded in our agency to really get to know our data system and be able to have those, have the meetings and liaison with the OCIO's office. The actual programming is done in the OCIO's office. And so what we have to do, what our staff has to do is identify issues and then report those issues over to the CIO's office. And then they work together to come up with solutions to that. Perhaps Heather can give you more information about that. But we just think that, the learning curve for somebody to understand our data system. The current employee was involved back in 2015 in the original development of that system. Plus, the fact that she has been with our agency for over 30 years, kind of grew up with the way we collect data and has a thorough understanding of that. And I don't think it's something where we could just hire somebody and they could come in and have an understanding, because they would also have to understand the child welfare system and the N-Focus system, which interfaces directly with our data system.
And the OCIO's office does have knowledge of this database, but they're not willing to take on that duty.
Well, their duties are a little different. They do the actual programming.
Okay, so they
And the
won't provide
development.
support.
Right. We also have other staff within the agency that have taken on just other IT-related functions that are not part of their normal duties. So handling any kind of hardware issues that come up. And also, there are also some liaison functions there with the CIO's office as well as other contracted providers that the state uses.
All right, are there other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
We'll invite Other testifiers regarding the Foster Care Review Office budget? Welcome.
Hello. Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and present information related to Program 353, the Nebraska Children's Commission, administratively housed within the Foster Care Review Office. My name is Amanda Adams, AMANDA, ADAMS, and I'm the Policy Analyst for the Nebraska Children's Commission. The Commission is a statutory body that was created in 2012 as a permanent forum for collaboration among state, local, community, public, and private stakeholders in the child welfare and juvenile justice programs and services. Over 250 stakeholders and community members across the state participate in the Commission's initiatives, which have significantly impacted on child welfare and juvenile justice policy and legislation. The Commission is the only statutory body that is charged with working with all branches of the government on these issues and has consistently been tasked with additional duties to improve outcomes for children and families in the state. Since its existence, the Commission has positively impacted the well-being of Nebraskans, most vulnerable youth and families, by recommending increased access to services that meet their mental and behavioral health needs. The Commission's primary function as a dynamic collaborative leadership body requires meeting space, travel reimbursement, lodging for members, and other operating expenses. In recognition of the state's revenue forecast, the Commission respectfully appreciates the budget afforded to the Commission for the ongoing work of the staff and members, continuing operating expenses, and carrying out legislative duties. Significant efforts have been made to reduce expenditures as much as possible, including reduced numbers and frequency of in-person meetings, reduced food costs, and utilizing no-cost meeting spaces when possible. To ensure recommended policy reflects the needs of families throughout Nebraska, voices from all communities must have the opportunity to engage with our work. The quality of the Commission's deliverables is dependent on operating funds to reimburse individuals to travel across the state and participate in creating recommendations for Nebraska's systems. One example of the Commission's ability to bring stakeholders together is a statutory foster care reimbursement rate committee. This committee was established by statute to create a forum in which the Department of Health and Human Services, foster parents, and foster care providers collaborate to create payment structures to recruit and retain foster parents while ensuring the best interests of foster youth served. The committee recommended a treatment family care model in 2020 that DHHS is currently working to implement and get approval through the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services to allow families involved in foster care systems to experience seamless services with rated funding. The most recent added statutory group, the Alternative Response Advisory Committee, was created in 2020 to examine the department's alternative response to reports on child abuse and neglect and to make recommendations to the legislature and the department regarding ongoing use of alternative and traditional responses and provide provisions of services to ensure child safety. In this legislative season, there's a number of bills that are a product of the Commission's work and bills that require the Commission to undertake additional tasks. The Commission welcomes these tasks and looks forward to working collaboratively with stakeholders that are committed to improving the lives of children and families in Nebraska. The Commission also respectfully asks to carry over funds from the previous funding year. Due to the recent executive committee, staff, and commission member turnover, we'd like to use the carryover funding to cover an intense Children's Commission retreat. In previous years, the retreat has been shorter with fewer engagement sessions to save resources. Being able to utilize this carryover funding to provide a robust retreat at a central location for all commission members will reignite the passion towards improving the safety and well-being of children and families. While going remote with more of our meetings has saved in physical resources, the in-person aspect of being united toward a common mission has gotten lost over the last years. Carryover funds will also be used to engage experts to speak to the Commission throughout the year with topics to include strategic planning, racial and ethnic disparities, and improved outcomes within child and family systems. Thank you to the committee for your time and consideration.
Other questions? Do you have an estimate of your carryover fund amount?
We're about 20% under budget right now. So I think that's around 30,000.
All right. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there other testifiers regarding the Foster Care Review Office? Seeing none, I have no position comments. That will conclude Agency 70, Foster Care Review Office. We'll now open the hearing for Agency 76, Commission on Indian Affairs. Welcome, Director.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriation Committee. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you today. I am Judy Gosh-Kabosh, the Executive Director of the Nebraska Commission on Indian Affairs, and that is spelled JVI, Gosh-Kabosh, GAIASHKIBOS. The Nebraska Commission on Indian Affairs was formed in 1971. We are a non-code state agency that advocates for Nebraska's first citizens. What is unique about our agency from all other agencies is that we serve the federal, state, and tribal citizens. I myself am an enrolled citizen of the Ponca tribe of Nebraska, and I'm also a citizen of the United States of America. So we don't serve minorities, we serve tribal citizens. And we also have a statutory responsibility that no other commission has. And that is for the return and the care of human remains per state law and federal law. So with that said, excuse me, I've asked for a little bit of water. Got a little bit of sore throat. This is, I've been serving since 1995 for new people. New senators, I'm just meeting. So I want you to know, 27 years I've been the director of the Commission on Indian Affairs, and I still have a passion and love what I do. So this is my 28th year, and I don't know if that means I've been before this committee 13 times or 14 times, but nonetheless, what I thought I would do today is demonstrate what our agency does so well with the staff, to other people, and myself. I've really been fortunate to have my assistant, Scott Schaefer, for the last 15 years, and we too have been challenged with the turnover in our secretarial staff. Currently, I have Jessica Stoner, and she's been with us for about 7 years, or 7 months. She took actually a pay cut to come work for our agency because she wanted to do this kind of work, working with tribal communities. And she came from the Historical Society over there at the museum, and she came to us. So we're really blessed to have such dedicated staff. Before you, what we are doing today is we are here to celebrate all that our little agency of 3 has accomplished in the last 2 years. And I hope you give me enough time to whiz through this. There's so many things that we have done with such a small staff. And most of these different activities that we have provided to the state, we have raised the money. We have not been funded the money from state dollars beyond our budget. So we're very good at raising money, but I can't raise money for salaries to increase that. So I'd like to start with our partnerships that we have built. In the 27 years that I've served, I've been really fortunate to meet so many wonderful people. And I think that our agency's record has grown, the credibility of these partnerships reflected. So the first page, if you look at, we have worked with the Dr. Susan LaFleche-Picotte Hospital Restoration since 2017. That is located in Walt Hill. Dr. Susan LaFleche was America's first Native doctor from the Omaha tribe. Our agency wrote the first grant to the USDA for $100,000 that was funded, did the feasibility study. Since 2017, we have raised $5 million, private and other USDA grants. So that Dr. Susan Hospital will be opened in next fall. Very excited and proud of that legacy for Nebraska. Turning to the next page, you'll see that we have celebrated 2 Indigenous Peoples' Day. That was a bill that was passed. And again, for our first Indigenous Peoples' Day that was held, we raised our agency $40,000 to do that event, where over 600 people attended. So for example, someone donated the money for everyone to wear a t-shirt. That was a $6,000 donation. On the Centennial Mall, there is a bronze sculpture of Dr. Susan. Our agency found a friend and donor in Larry Small, who lives in Lincoln. He donated $125,000 for the Dr. Susan sculpture that is now proudly on the mall. The next Indigenous Peoples' Day was held this past fall, and that was featuring Chief Standing Bear Prize for Courage. And Wes Studi, the actor, was awarded that honor, and there was a small sculpture created by Benjamin Victor. Again, that event, we raised the money for 200 people to attend a dinner at the League. Moving on, other partnerships that we've worked on. We have, I serve on the board of the Jocelyn Museum. And so you see a picture there with the director, Jack Becker. Next to him is Dr. Carol Swartz. She donated the money for the endowed Dr. Susan and Suzette chair at UNMC. So we worked with her on that to get it named after those 2 individuals. The next page, our job is to serve as a liaison between state, federal, and tribal entities. So we hosted Colin McLeod, the Canadian consulate from Minneapolis. And you'll also see a picture with Governor Pillen. Since he became the governor, we hosted a meeting in his office where we met Petunia the pig, which was just named yesterday. Governor Pillen was so gracious to spend time with 2 Irishmen that came here, Jim Sheridan and Bart Daly, and we met to discuss a movie on Standing Bear. Jim Sheridan did the movie My Left Foot, and so that's moving forward as well. And so that's an example of working with state government. I think I'm going to move forward a little further. I'm going to move over to tribal communications and outreach. A couple of weeks ago, we hosted an event in Omaha at the Coneco, and that was to honor Chief Big Elk. Mecca in Omaha donated $250,000 to have a sculpture of Omaha Chief Big Elk. And I serve on the Native Advisory, and it was a part of getting that to happen, and that was a result of the death of Zachary Bear Heels, who died in Omaha. So this coming summer, we will be unveiling that bronze sculpture done by Benjamin Victor, who did the Standing Bear on Centennial Mall. And as you recall, our donor, Don Miller Campbell, donated $150,000 for that, and the one that's in the U.S. Statuary Hall. So again, partnerships that we are very proud of and accomplishments that celebrate the First Peoples in the state of Nebraska. We have a tribal license plate that has raised over $80,000. Each year we award 5 $5,000 scholarships, 4 from that fund and 1 from an endowed fund at the Lincoln Community Foundation. So that is ongoing. The next page, you'll see that we have been working on the Genoa Indian School repatriation of those children that are buried there that we're trying to find. That falls under our statutory obligations of the return of human remains. Myself, I'm a survivor descendant of that school. My mother attended the Genoa Indian School where the motto was "Kill the Indian, Save the Man." It closed in 1934. And thank goodness my mother survived, and I am here today. So my work is very much an honor and dedicated to finding those children. And we worked on the Stolen Spirits documentary that won the LA Film Festival. It was aired nationally. Australians came to Nebraska and worked with us to do that documentary. As you know, we've had several bills this session introduced, and one is for MMIP. All 3 of our bills that were introduced are moving to the floor. So we work on legislation with you. And let's see. I want to wrap this up. The last thing that I would say, a couple things. We have the Sovereign Native Youth Leadership Academy. We've been doing that for 10 years, partnering with the Mid-American Transportation Center, private funds, and from the university that allow us to bring in over 40 tribal students from our tribal headquartered nations to the University of Nebraska. And we hope that that will give them pathways to becoming educated and benefit from all that Nebraska has to offer. Across the street this last year, we had a building named after Standing Bear, and that was because of Governor Pete Ricketts' love of Standing Bear and working with Jason Jackson and DAS. So we were a part of that whole celebration. To demonstrate what we do with the federal government, last week, we were so thrilled. This is the first time in 27 years that I've ever hosted a secretary from the federal level, and that was Secretary Marty Walsh, who was the Secretary of Labor. He has just stepped down, and they have a new interim that will be voted on by Congress. But the Secretary of Labor came to Nebraska. Our office coordinated that meeting, and it was hosted over at Morrill Hall Museum. Lovely event. The tribes were all able to come. They all received money through the Workforce Investment Act. So my report, I think, demonstrates that pictures speak louder than words. The Indian Commission, although small, like the Latino Commission and other small advocacy agencies, does so much to celebrate our rich culture. It helps with tourism. We do so many things, and we also attempt to try to remove barriers that keep our people from having the same quality of life as others. And I look forward to continuing this service. This is my life's passion, and I'm so honored that I get to work with our tribal nations and get to know all of you better. And I have a lot of new senators to get better acquainted with. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I would like to once again thank my staff who are so supportive and helpful to me. I could not do the work. I kind of liken it to that they fill up the gas tank and give me the map, and then I go out and do all this and build partnerships and relationships and celebrate Nebraska, because we love Nebraska. This is our homeland, and we're always been here, and we're not going away. And I think you can see Warhorse Casino with the work of Lance Morgan. That's a wonderful example of how far we've come from when I started 27 years ago. I never imagined the opportunities that our people would have. And I know Senator Clements was in DC when we unveiled the Standing Bear sculpture, and my daughter worked on that. My mother went to the Genoa Indian School. My daughter was a legislative page. She graduated from the university and then Columbia Law School. And she now is the pro bono attorney on the Willa Cather and on Arkansas's Daisy Bates and Johnny Cash. So that's an example of what an education can do and what you all have done to help our people. So thank you all. We could use more money, but we want to say we are very appreciative and we are proud to call this our homeland.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Director Josh Kabosh.
Did you have one?
Oh, who?
I just
Excuse
have
me.
one quick question. What's the total population on all the reservations here in Nebraska?
It's around, varies, but from the census, like 1% of the population, 30,000 people. And however, our people, our women are murdered at a higher rate. And recently I heard from one of my tribes that there are 300 children in out-of-home foster care on the reservation. And I'm going to keep that confidential, which one that was, but 300 children. That is really sad. So our people are very vulnerable, and we have a lot of underlying risk factors because the reservation lands are in isolated communities. They don't have all the infrastructure that we have here. In fact, we had a bill last year that didn't make it out of the committee, this committee, Appropriations, for ARPA funding for water, safe water for those 3 reservations, because currently they can't drink water like you and I can and turn on the water. They have to use bottled water. So that's something that we're going to continue to work with, because that really should be something everybody in Nebraska can have, is clean, safe water. So that was a long answer to your question.
Thank you.
And I have someone else that's going to testify about increases to our agency budget that I think is more appropriate coming from someone else and not me, because it seems a bit self-serving for me to ask for increases for myself. But I think that we demonstrated through what this report is, that a little agency can do a lot to celebrate the state of Nebraska. And we think it's just a wonderful place. And we're looking forward to working with all of you.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Additional testifiers regarding the Commission on Indian Affairs, please come forward.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the Appropriations Committee, for the record, my name is Don Wesley, D-O-N-W-E-S-E-L-Y. I'm actually here representing myself. I'm not representing any other organization. And specifically, I'm here asking that we increase the salary of Judy Goshbegosh. She is perhaps the longest serving director of any agency in the state, going back to 1995. I can't think of anybody who's been around longer than that. It's so long ago, I was in the legislature when she started here, and I had a chance to work with her at that time. And through the years that she's been here, she's done a marvelous job. You heard about a lot of those things. One of the things that I would like to talk about is herself and her honors. In 2012, she was the Nebraska Humanities Silver Award recipient, which is a high honor. And in 2022, here in Lincoln, the Lincoln Rotary named her Nebraskan of the Year. And that's for the many different projects she's headed up. She mentioned some of those, but the efforts on Standing Bear to have him represented in the U.S. Capitol and raising the money for the statue that was placed there. She's raised money, as she mentioned, on a number of things. She covered a lot of these things. One of them she didn't cover was white clay. That was such a huge issue, so controversial for many, many years. And Judy worked with Patty Pansing Brooks and of course, Senator Brewer took a real strong lead on that. And we finally got that problem resolved. Senator Brewer has played a very important role on the inside on getting a lot of things done in the last, I think this is the 7th year. But Judy, on the outside, has been the person who has worked all kinds of years to try and make a difference. On her salary, I think with the proposal, she would get a 5% increase in her salary to $95,000. Frankly, I think she should get paid $10,000 to $20,000 more than that. She has raised hundreds of thousands. In fact, she just talked about millions of dollars that were raised for the project, the Susan LaFleche Hospital renovation. She is tireless in raising money and has done it very successfully. So she's an investment. Hiring her and paying her a decent salary brings many rewards, I think, in the projects that she's been able to accomplish with her staff. And her staff have done a great job as well, and I thank them. There's a lot that could be said about her. She covered some of those things. I think she's wonderful. I think she's done a great job. I think she's underpaid. I know there are others who are underpaid as well and doing a great job in state government, but of all of them, she's served longer and has been as successful as any of them. So I'm here in support of a salary increase for Judy.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Clements. So what did you say herself? Did you mention what herself?
Yeah, I did. I'm told that she's due for a 5% salary increase up to $95,000.
That's for this year.
Yeah, that would be in July, starting in July. But actually, a friend of mine studied agency director salaries, and they came back with a number of $118,000 on average for some of these independent agencies and what they get paid. So when you look at it that way, for as long as she's been here and as successful as she's been, she's far below what you would think she should be paid.
Was that $118,000 compared to other agencies of the state or outside?
No, in the state of Nebraska, some independent agencies. I can get you which ones were looked at, so.
Yeah, that'd be good, because the information I have here doesn't show that.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll get that to
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Wesley.
Thank you for your time.
Are there other testifiers regarding Commission on Indian Affairs? Seeing none, we have no position comments. We will close Agency 76 and open the hearing for Agency 90, African American Affairs Commission. Welcome.
Welcome. You guys don't need a stretch break yet, do you? No?
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Connie Edmond, spelled CONNIEEDMOND, and I am one of the 14 commissioners appointed by the governor in 2021 to serve on the first Commission on African American Affairs. We have 2 commissioners located in Lincoln, 2 in Papillion Bellevue area, 1 in Crofton, 1 in Aurora, 1 in Bennington, and 5 in the greater North Omaha area. I, along with 2 fellow commissioners that are here in support today, serve on the Executive Committee. The Executive Committee has been charged with the honor of establishing the framework for the sustainability of the Commission. By statute, we are required to hold 4 quarterly Commission meetings. However, we as an Executive Committee meet weekly for about 2 hours, in addition to heading up other committees and working on various tasks and activities, fielding phone calls, etc. We have been grateful for the assistance and guidance we have received from Judy Goshkabosh, the Executive Director for the Indian Affairs Commission, which was established about 52 years ago in 1971. Our function is to promote state and federal legislation beneficial to the African American community, coordinate programs regarding housing, education, welfare, medical and dental care, employment, economic development, law and order, and related problems, to keep the governor's office apprised of our work, and to provide the public with information and education relevant to African American community in Nebraska. Per the 2020 census data, there were about 91,896 African Americans residing in 89 of our 93 counties, which is about a 96% representation of African Americans throughout the state of Nebraska. Since our appointments, we have worked to build camaraderie amongst the commissioners, survey commissions about our priorities, develop bylaws, work on a strategic plan, educate ourselves on the state accounting and budgeting processes, learn about how other commissions operate, not only within our state, but in other states, write job descriptions for our positions, network with lawmaking authorities, and start acclimating ourselves to the legislative process. Although the work has been rewarding, we have run into some challenges. The statute states that an office will be provided. However, due to the renovations at the Capitol, an office was not able to be provided, thus creating delays in our ability to advertise and hire staff. This resulted in us having to utilize about 40% of our remaining appropriations available for operating expenses for office space. Thus, after we pay for DES and OCIO services, that leaves us about $1,100 a month for general expenses. In addition, the PSL, which is about 87% of our overall budget for full-time positions, has raised concerns with the current employment market. In our current search for an executive director, we have received feedback that our starting salary is not competitive. We also need a seasoned employee to assist with legislative affairs and an efficient office staff personnel to deal with daily office and administrative tasks. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because the other commissions have expressed the same concerns. We appreciate the funds that have been appropriated to the commission, and we are committed to being fiscally responsible with those funds. We are a startup commission, and I have to relate that to a startup business. With a startup business, there's a need for initial one-time costs in order to build a firm foundation for a business, such as website, software, marketing materials, office setup, research costs, equipment, etc. We will continue to conduct research in order to understand the best return on investment on the funds we have available, and we will seek opportunities to partner with other state agencies and community partners to leverage our work and impact the community. However, not having a startup manual or a turnkey operation This will require significant investment of time, resources, and trial and error. We respectfully request that you consider allowing all of our unused funds as of June 30th, 2023 to be retained and reappropriated for use in the upcoming biennium. This will allow us to absorb one-time costs and continue to get the commission on a firm foundation in order to be able to sustain the work that we have been called to do. In addition, as you review the overall budget, we ask if there is any room available to allocate any additional funds to our commissions. We would greatly appreciate it. As Governor Pillen stated in his letter to the legislature, the goal of the budget is straightforward to make clear his commitment to shrinking the growth and size of state government. It proceeds from the premise that money consumed by government belongs to the people and that fiscal stewardship demands that such resources be returned to the people where possible. Thank you for your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
We have other testifiers regarding African American Affairs Commission. Seeing none, that closes the hearing for Agency 90. We're going to switch to bills now. And we will now open the hearing for LB 275. Senator Wishart, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Anna Wishart, A-N-N-A, W-I-S-H-A-R-T, and I represent the 27th Legislative District here in West Lincoln and southwestern Lancaster County. I am here today to introduce LB 275, a bill that would seek to increase the annual appropriation to CASA by $500,000. So to be clear, that would be from the $500,000 that we're currently providing in aid, another additional $500,000 annually to make it a total of $1 million in aid. This bill is very near and dear to my heart. My husband and I are both licensed foster parents through Cedars Home for Children, and while we do not foster currently, we have fostered in the past, both for long-term support and in the respite care arena. And what I have known, having been integrally involved in the foster care system as a parent, is that kids jump around a lot from home to home. You often see, especially as the older a child gets, the harder it is to find placement. And so what happens then for that child is they don't have a single adult in their life who is consistent as they go from family to family. That's where CASA comes in. Court-appointed special advocates are the glue for foster care children. It's a volunteer who signs up to be that mentor and support for that foster kid through the court system, regardless of what home they're jumping from. For those of you who are new to the committee and those of you who are new to CASA, CASA helps train and develop volunteers to speak in court for the protection and welfare of abused and neglected children, but it's so much more than that. And when you hear from some of the advocates today, you will hear how much of a mentor and support system this volunteer is for that child, even outside of the court system. The CASA program was established in Nebraska in 1986, so this is not a program, it's been around for a very long time. And it has grown to provide a CASA volunteer to children in foster care in over 54 counties across our state. The newest program in Holt County is swearing in its first volunteers this week. CASA programs provide a volunteer advocate for children who have been removed from their homes for abuse or neglect by the state of Nebraska. And as you saw with our previous testifier from the Foster Care Review Board, it's over 3,000 children in our state who are removed because of neglect or abuse. And again, many of those are bumping around from different home to different home. These volunteers are there to represent the best interest of the child by spending time with the child and those involved in the court case and providing a report to the judge. And what's so important about this too is that oftentimes when you get into these court situations, you have biological parents, you have foster parents, you have attorneys. This volunteer is there to represent the child. They don't have any other bias than representing the need of that child. I have worked, as I've said, with CASA for many years. In fact, the reason that you see Senator Brewer is one of the co-sponsors of this legislation is that he and I really became strong friends at the CASA Gala years ago, where he actually ended up bidding on the dog that he now owns and is his best friend. This year, they came to me with a concern that foundation funding statewide has been cut by $432,000. In addition, they have been informed by the Nebraska Crime Commission that federal VOCA funding, that's the Victim of Crime Act funding, will be cut by 40% for grants starting July 1st, 2023. And this would mean that another $422,321 would be cut to 15 of the 22 local CASA programs. And the director for CASA, she will be here to kind of walk you through those numbers and what that's going to mean in terms of their budget. And she'll be able to talk to you as to why this funding has decreased. What I believe you're going to hear today first is that we need to have more CASA volunteers working throughout the state. There's absolutely a shortage. This is such an important role for Nebraskans to take on. And the more funding we provide as a legislature to this program, this goes directly out to recruit volunteers. I mean, it's such a good investment if you think about it. We're not asking to add more staff. We're asking to fund a program that goes out and finds Nebraskans who are willing to volunteer their time to provide this integral support system for youth. I hope you'll listen to this testimony today and provide this additional funding request. You know, I said no to a lot of things this year in terms of funding requests, and this is the only piece of legislation I've brought before this committee in terms of funding because it is that important as a way that we invest in this program because it leads to happier children, healthier children, and the overall welfare of our state. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none?
I just wowed you all into silence, Madam Chair.
We'll now open it up for proponents for LB 275. Please come forward.
Well,
thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the committee. I want to thank you for your time today and your consideration of LB 275. I also want to thank Senator Wishart. She's a longtime supporter of CASA, as she told you, as well as all of the work that she's done to be an advocate for foster care children and the services that they need.
Would you spell your name?
I'm sorry. It's Corrie Kilty, Corriekelty.
Thank you.
As you heard from Senator Wishart's opening, this bill would increase our funding from $500,000 to $1 million per year. You also heard her say the first program in Nebraska was started in Sarpy County in 1986. Dodge County followed the following year, and since then we have grown to 54 counties with 946 volunteers advocating for 2,070 children last year. Much of that growth, including adding 20 counties, more than 500 volunteers, and serving more than 900 children, happened since our first appropriation from the state of Nebraska 12 years ago. In the past 2 years, we've seen a significant cut to our local programs from a private funder of $342,000. We've been informed that federal cuts will mean another $422,000 of lost income to 15 of our local programs. These cuts will not only prevent us from meeting our goal of providing a CASA volunteer to every child in Nebraska who needs one, but we'll have to decrease the number of children with an advocate without other funding. In the handout that I provided to you, there's a little graphic that shows that for every 30 volunteers that we have, we need to have one staff who supports and supervises that volunteer and has no other job duties. This requirement is essential to providing intensive screening and quality training and support to CASA volunteers as they are working with children who have been abused or neglected. This year, we asked the University of Nebraska at Omaha Center for Public Affairs Research to conduct an up-to-date review of the cost-benefit analysis of CASA services to the state of Nebraska. I also provided you with the handout they gave us, looks like this, as a result of their study. They conducted a simple cost-benefit analysis looking at the cost savings based upon the reduced length of time a child spends in foster care when they have a CASA volunteer, the reduced number of foster care placements a child with a CASA volunteer experiences, the benefits incurred because children with a CASA volunteer are 17% more likely to be adopted, the benefits to children as they are more likely to do better in school and graduate if they have a CASA volunteer, the improved health of a child with a CASA volunteer, and the increased safety of a child with a CASA volunteer. The study summarizes that for every dollar invested in Nebraska CASA, $6 are returned to the state of Nebraska. And on the back of the handout, you'll see that that's broken down into a table with which each of the things that they examined. The investment of CASA volunteers is essential and saves the state more than it costs. In addition to program expansion, recruiting, training, and supporting volunteers with the CASA fund, we have conducted evaluations of the program, ensuring quality services with these funds. We also fund our statewide data system, and we provide an annual volunteer and staff conference with a portion of these funds. We thank you for consideration of this bill funding CASA's essential service to the children who are abused and neglected in Nebraska. And we only have one other testifier who's a board member of a local program, as well as she was a CASA volunteer, because we understood you had a lot of things on your agenda today. So if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer.
Senator Dorn.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
And I was going to ask Senator Wishart, but I will ask you instead. The $500,000 that we currently fund.
Yes.
How are those dollars being used? Because the volunteers are theoretically volunteers, or are they used for, I call it travel expenses or what? And then what will the $500,000 of this bill possibly be used for? How will your group use that or allocate those?
Yep, great question. So in the formula, it's specific that 80% of the funds are given to our local programs for recruitment, screening, and training of volunteers. So that includes the staff time to do those things, but it also includes what it costs to do a background check. Every volunteer goes through an interview like a job interview. They have to provide 3 references, and they're screened while they go through their initial training. The initial training for a CASA volunteer is 30 hours of training. So all of that is kind of woven into those costs, as well as the fact that they're required by our state statute to have ongoing training every year, and we require 12 hours of ongoing training. So all of that is kind of woven into the 80% of recruitment and training grants. And then 10% can be used for expansion or new programs. So for instance, Senator Wishart mentioned that in Holt County, we have a brand new program who's swearing in their first 6 volunteers tomorrow. They have been receiving for the past couple of years, as they've been starting up their program, a grant in order to help them with the costs of starting the new program. And then 10% is for innovative programming. So we used to be under the state court, and now we're under the foster care review office, and we sort of work with them on what that means. And we've kind of honed it down to our database for our state, any studies that we do to make sure that we're being effective, and a little bit to help us with ongoing training at our state conference for innovative type trainings.
To follow up on that then, and I'm looking at maybe the 500,000 we currently fund, 80% of that needs to be used for, I call it the recruitment of the dream. But now with this expansion, do these new dollars also have to meet those requirements, or is there a different part of your CASA program that they will fit into?
No, because unless you all decide to change that formula, it's in statute and it will remain the same uses.
It will. Okay, thank you.
And with their loss in, so some of the VOCA funding is paying for that recruitment and training right now. And you mentioned mileage for volunteers, those types of things. With the loss of that funding, it will help so much to be able to make up those costs.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation.
Thank you, Senator Clements. So are the CASA volunteers reimbursed at all for any of their expenses?
Yes, and I'll tell you, it varies across the state, and it also varies in between volunteers who ask for reimbursement and those who don't. So some of our programs do reimburse mileage. If they're more and more, because of what's happened with the state, our programs are providing things that families need and that children need, whether that be clothing, shoes, essentials, as they go into foster care and they don't have those things. What we find is more and more, they don't have those things. So our programs provide those. We don't allow the volunteers to provide those, or for instance, we may do a drive to get Christmas gifts for children. Volunteers can't purchase those. We do that as a program to avoid any ethical issues that might arise. So that is about the only expenses that what we look at is mileage.
Other questions? Do you know what the cost of the foster child is to the state in a year?
I do not know that off the top of my head, but I will find out for you.
All right. Be curious. I think I saw $185 million in a fiscal year for 4,000 children. It was about $45,000 per child the last I tried to roughly figure.
That makes sense.
It's shocking.
Yeah, it is. But when you see what children go through and the services that are needed, and then you see in the foster care review office reports how many children are moved from placement to placement, and it makes sense.
Regarding your foundation funding cut, what was the reason for that?
I don't know. So it was a large foundation that had been providing grants to us for our rural programs. So we would do a grants program and we would give the programs to them. And then they also are providing separate grants to our larger urban programs. And they did not just cut CASA, they cut all of the nonprofits that they were funding. So it was across the board, but I don't know the reason for that cut.
And what is VOCA?
Victim of Crime Act funding. It's federal funding that is provided to our Nebraska Crime Commission, and then they do a grants process to provide it to agencies that assist crime victims. So for children, the child advocacy centers and CASA programs qualify to get those grants. And then there's also the adult victims, like adult assistance victims program, domestic violence shelters. So they do a variety of grants, and they've told all of us that they expect a 40% cut this year because the federal threshold of what they can fund has decreased, and they're getting less from the federal government.
Okay, you'll still get some funding, but 40% less than previously. All right. Senator Lippincott.
What's the average age of a child that's helped through this program?
The average age, I'm not sure of, but I can tell you a lot more of the children are younger than older. Off the top of my head, I would guess it's probably between 7 and 10 years old because we have so many younger children than we do older children. But I can tell you, I look at my stats and tell you for sure.
I see people behind you agreeing with that. Yes. All right, thank you. Senator Lippincott.
And also your pie right here shows about 91% of your funding is from other than the state. This
Yes.
is a tax deductible organization, correct?
Yes. And Nebraska CASA Association is its own 501c3. Our local programs are members of ours, and almost all of them are their own 501c3 programs that are directed by the local board of directors, except for a couple of them in Dawson County and in Sarpy County are under the county. So they're a county program under their counties.
Is it mostly from individuals or agencies or organizations?
Mostly it is foundation funding and local programs receive county funding and then individual donations.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there other proponents for LB 275?
I got two of those.
Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you, Senators. Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Feldhausen. That's BrendaFeldhousen. I'm the board president of the Cass County CASA program. Our local program is one of 22 in Nebraska that recruit, screen, train, and support volunteers who are appointed by judges to advocate for abused and neglected children in the courts. Our program is one of the smaller CASA programs in the state, serving 83 children over the past 3 years with 18 volunteers currently. I served our county as a volunteer for 3 years until I transitioned into the president position of the board. Because I know how important it is for every child in foster care to have that one person dedicated to their best interest, I felt compelled to speak here today on behalf of the children we serve. Oftentimes, we find there are frequent changes in caseworkers and people who provide services to these children. But their CASA volunteer is that one caring adult who stays with them during this scary yet critical time in a child's life. I've seen firsthand how the network of programs statewide work together to be as efficient as possible. Our local program fundraises at the local level, in addition to receiving state and federal funds. All of these funding sources are essential so that we can provide this needed service to our children. I would like to share the backstory to just one of the cases we had the privilege of advocating for with you. Twins born 11 weeks premature kept returning to the hospital with failure to thrive. A healthcare professional saw signs of possible neglect and called the child abuse hotline. The state placed the twins with their aunt and family support services began. A CASA volunteer was then assigned. The twins continued to struggle to gain weight and were removed from the aunt's home and placed in traditional foster care against CASA's recommendation. Our CASA volunteer was the first to realize that the mom was lower functioning and couldn't handle the medical needs of the twins, but their aunt could and would provide the opportunity for their mother to have supervised visits. Our CASA volunteer continued to recommend the twins should be returned to the aunt's care, and the court agreed. Through many meetings and the involvement of the CASA volunteer, it was agreed that the aunt would adopt the children, giving mom the ability to see them and have a relationship with them. The children's health improved, and they were adopted by their aunt. The attorney for the children commented, "This would not have had a happy ending without the work of that CASA volunteer." See, our end goal is not to always recommend parental termination, but to truly find a way to ensure these children remain as close to home as possible while receiving the best care available. After all, isn't that what we want for all of our children? The case lasted nearly 4 years, and these children had 5 different caseworkers, but only one CASA volunteer. Our CASA volunteer was on the case for 1,456 days, all 4 years. This is why we stand behind our belief in a strong CASA volunteer program, and this is why we are here today to ask for your support. In summary, we are asking for your continued funding to keep our effective, cost-saving volunteers in place for the children in the system. We are also asking for additional funding due to funding cuts. Our foster children deserve a voice as they are going through this very difficult time in their life, and we know we can continue to make a positive difference in their life with you beside us. Please consider continued support for this very important cause. Thank you for your time.
Are there questions? I wanted to clarify something. How many kids does one CASA volunteer care for at one time?
It depends on how many volunteers are in the program, and it depends on the size of the family. Some families have 1 child, some families can have 5, maybe. Yeah, I mean, it really just depends on the size of the family.
But just one family at a time then?
We hope, if we have enough volunteers, you know. That can be a challenge some years when we're low on volunteers, but we work hard to.
That's the goal.
Yes.
Is to just focus on one family and to stay with that one family rather than switching.
Absolutely. Yep.
See. So, Cass County, I've been aware of your work.
Yes.
Thank you for that. And
Thank you.
Senator Lippincott.
How many of the foster care children turn into an adoption case?
The ultimate goal is reunification, but what would you, on average?
That's a good question, Sam. We have it in our annual report. I don't have it just off the top of my head, but I can get that for you. And I was just going to follow up, 8.7 is the average age of foster care that's involved in child welfare, median is 8.
We'll just go ahead and repeat that. 8.7 years old is that what you said? Average age.
Involved in child welfare, and that's according to our most recent point in time data of all of the children in child welfare as of December 31st, 2022.
All right. Thank you. Other questions from the committee? She gave her name. Oh, okay. We asked for your name for the comments that you made.
Yes, my name is Heather Wood, HEATHER, WOOD. Monica had mentioned me before, I'm the research director of the Foster Care Listing Office.
All right. Heather Wood. Thank you for the information. Are there other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
And are there other proponents for LB 275? Seeing none, are there any opponents on LB 275? Seeing none, is anyone here in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, you're welcome to close, Senator.
Thank you. I don't have a lot more to say. I think the 2 testifiers did a really good job. All I will say is we are happy to answer any of the questions that you asked, and my staff and the team behind us will get you those answers. Thank you.
Are there other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. And we do have position comments on LB 275. We have 10 proponents, no opponents, no neutral. That closes the hearing on LB 275, and that concludes the hearings for today.
Hey, I'm not betting the lead.